Welcome to the Deconstructing Religion podcast with your
Welcome.
hosts. Hello, Francis. How are you doing today?
Francis O'Connor here. Happy to be here. And my friend Mo Thomas right there.
Hey everyone, Mo Thomas. Good to be here. And our friend, TimODavis.
Davis. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. We all have quite a connection that we've had a bit of an interesting relationship with our first religion, our first way of relating to our higher power, and what that meant for us, and what that brought us to, and what that looks like for us moving forward, and how we relate to spirituality. I think it's a discussion that a lot of people have a lot of stuff going with, right? For goodness sake, I know that when I do coaching and teaching, that one of the themes that we often come up with is that, in my early days, I was indoctrinated into this way of feeling the world, seeing the world, and that it really made an interesting relationship with how I see life. And the most common theme is a feeling of having to be punished by God because I've done something wrong. So everybody's got their thing. That obviously is mine. Let's talk about how we got started with this. Mo, do you want to talk about kind of how we got here and just sort of frame it? You were talking earlier nicely about how you wanted to kind of set this up. So I'm going to turn it over to you, if I may.
Yeah, sure. I notice the same as you, Tim, in talking to so many people. Their experience has been a view of God that they got from childhood that frames the way they see themselves, see the world, see God. And it's almost always a heavy dualistic model. And that's not just personal experience, it's the collective unconsciousness. So religion has gotten into the psyche of the entire society. So it may be not necessarily your own religious experience, but just taking in by osmosis the religion that's pervading, at least here in the States. And so I have definitely gone that path and at one point rejected it entirely because it was just so toxic. And so in recent years, coming back to it, I've seen the beauty in bridging our current experience with my childhood experience, because the essence of everything that I was taught and that I gained still remains. So now I can step back into those spaces and still appreciate all that I hear and see, and also recognize the junk, the distortion, the control mechanisms that have been piled on top of it. And so mainly I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to have been able to excavate the essence of what Jesus taught from all of the other stuff that's been piled on top of it over the centuries, and see the world very differently today.
You used the phrase dualistic. Can you talk about what that felt like for you and contrast that with how you see Jesus's teachings now?
I didn't know the word duality for most of my life until a couple years ago. And then I started reading some Christian authors who used, for example, the Gospel of John and Jesus teaching on non-duality. I said, what? Had no idea that was a part of what Jesus taught. So if I go back in the Christian tradition, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in Genesis chapter 3 that Adam and Eve both ate from, that tree now to me initiates this idea of us, them, good, evil, wrong, right, heaven, hell. So that scheme came into play right up front in the story. And rather than just looking at it literally, not going to question literal or not, I'm just saying that what we're able to recognize from the way the story unfolds is what happens to humanity when we eat of the tree of duality, of separation. We're separated from God, which means we're separated from each other, and now we have to cluster into different groups. And so at the heart of all conflict, all violence, all demeaning, demoralizing, and dehumanizing that we have seen throughout history. We see in the scriptures the start, the initiation, the origin point of all of that is eating from this tree of the knowledge
Mm,
of good and evil.
mm,
So I don't think it has anything to do with we disobeyed and God's punishing us. I think it's just the natural consequence of eating from that tree, and how it unfolds is we created that environment and God allowed it to be so. Never far, the presence of God is always there. In fact, covering Adam and Eve with handcrafted clothing that he made for them. This is no repentance. There's no asking for forgiveness. He did that before any repentance request as
mm,
an act of love, to say, even if you're distorted in your thinking, even if you see it as separation, I will never see it as separation. I will
mm,
always be with you. We'll never leave.
mm.
And so, man, what a difference that was for me, because like you, Tim, you said, you know, I was just waiting for God to strike me dead for some wrong move that I made. And for sure, ultimately, hell at the end of life. So part of the reframe for me, I would say the center of it is seeing a portrait of God
Mm,
so different than the one that I grew up with.
mm.
And that has been a long time journey to remake that portrait,
What a beautiful story.
all the way back from Genesis.
Mm. I know you have more detail that we'll definitely want to hear. But Francis, I would love to hear you talk about where you came from on this journey, because you have an amazing story to tell as well.
Yeah, long time journey, Mo. I'm with you there for sure. I grew up in Ireland, and I have a story that's very familiar to a lot of Irish people. The Catholic Church in 1950s and 1960s Ireland, we, the Republic of Ireland, where I grew up, and we actually grew up right on the border with Northern Ireland, which is still part of the United Kingdom. But the Republic of Ireland was 95% Roman Catholic at that time, and the church actually controlled pretty much everything, every aspect of life. Ireland became a republic in 1949. All of the hospitals were run by the Catholic Church. All of the schools are run by the Catholic Church. So the government made a smart decision at the time, which was give them control, because they have control. What we didn't know was what that would lead to would be this really vicious cycle of control by the Catholic Church. My own personal story, very simple. Grew up in a small town of 5,000 people. All the boys that I knew went to one school, the Christian Brothers School. In that school, everybody I know got physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. And it was pretty horrific. So my initial experience of religion was not very good. All I could think of at the time was, if that's God, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to know anything about it. And then to see this subsequent unfolding of that as friend after friend, people that I knew in that small town started taking their lives, including my brother. 8 people that I know at various times in their life took their lives. The only one common denominator I could return to was that school that we all went to together. And I attempted myself out of severe depression in my 20s. To have come from that scenario to finding non-duality through people like Michael Singer, Eckhart Tolle, Rupert Spira,
Mm,
Ramana Maharshi from the Eastern religion, just really opened up my eyes. Totally different perspective, not just different perspective, different experience of what it was like to relate to the divine. Mickey Singer talked a lot about you are not your thinking, you are not your patterns, you are not your thoughts, you are not these constructs. And as I began working with that and deconstructing, as we're talking about deconstruction, deconstructing this personality, started to have this different experience of, well, let me go back to Jesus, because Jesus was, for me, that's the guy that led that whole thing. That was my impression of Jesus. And as I meditated, this was kind of extraordinary to me. As I meditated, that all began to soften and soften. And then I started reading, as Mo just described, the words of Jesus and the acts of this particular man. And really, I couldn't find any conflict or fault in what he was saying or what he was doing. It's all very beautiful. And I had a situation in a meditation not that long ago where I came face to face with Jesus Christ. And it was just this soft, beautiful being of light. And I dropped on my knees and asked for forgiveness. I said to him in this meditation, I am sorry. I got you wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean I'm fully on board with religion per se. I still have, things that are disturbing about mass religion. But the message of Jesus, I began to see it for what it is. It's the same message that Buddha talked about. All the answers are within. And I'm like, wait a minute, Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you. Rumi said the whole universe is dancing within you. And the one that really nailed it for me, Francis of Assisi. I was named after Francis. And my wife and I, about 7 years ago, got to visit Assisi. Not only did we visit Assisi, we went up the mountain to the hermitage where he meditated and prayed in the mountains, just in a cave. And the experience of being in that place where thousands and thousands of pilgrims had gone before me, and feel that energy of that. And then the words of Francis, the one you're looking for is the one who's looking. And I just start seeing all these things kind of coming in together. And the one overarching thing that I'd heard so many times in 12-step programs, another story about that, but in 12-step programs, they talk a lot about spirituality as opposed to religion. Spirituality is wide and all-encompassing. And now I was seeing the truth of that. This is all-encompassing. Jesus, Buddha, Rumi, Francis of Assisi, Teresa of Avila, who said, God is looking through my eyes, hearing through my ears, speaking through my mouth, and loving through my heart. I'm like, that's a Christian contemplative, that's a Catholic Christian saint. I missed out on a lot because of my experience as a boy with these men who had all sorts of things going on. They had their own, but as I look at it now, sickness, illness, mental construct that wasn't of this world, that's for sure. So I don't even want to go into judgment about them, but that's what brought me to this place. Much different. So I'll leave it at that, Tim, for now. Obviously, we have a lot to discuss here, but I want to give you a chance to kind of describe your coming to light.
Thank you. From listening to you both, it seems like there was like a strong sort of parental or familial sort of pulling you into your respective faith groups. And that's a thing that I didn't actually have. I grew up in Vermont, a very small town. There were just a couple thousand people in this little town. And we had a Catholic church and a Protestant church. And I had to go to the Protestant church like twice a year, once for Christmas, once for Easter. And that was pretty much it. I did Sunday school and it was fine. But as soon as I could not go, I did not go. And so for many years, I was fine that way. I didn't really think about, I just had no conception of God other than this sort of dead energy of what it feels like to go into a church that's, not like hardly anybody in the church, not that much singing, not that much energy in the room, right? And it was just like, okay, this is a thing people do, but I'm not really sure why. And I went to college, right? And I left my little town and I go to college and I flunk out and I have a real crisis around, how I feel about myself and this amazing opportunity that I've now pissed away. And So with all the guilt and shame that I'd accumulated, I decided that I would go to a church on the recommendation of my college roommate, who was also having a hard time and found a very strict Baptist church. He got there via a girlfriend, right? So that's that's what got me into church. But the thing was, like, I want to say this, a lot of what I experienced there was fine. It was just, kind of like a bunch of people trying really hard to create some guardrails for themselves and do the right thing and sort of stick with the Bible. And I found that to be actually really helpful in the state that I was in. They were very open and very supportive. They really made themselves available to me. It was a heavy duty Baptist church. It was a Maranatha church. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
And,
know it well.
speaking in tongues and the whole thing. Right. And Pentecostal. Right. And so I really love that because I could feel energy there. Like they really did, like they had the energy going through there, the Holy Spirit. However, after a couple years of that, there was just a lot of things that didn't make sense, a lot of ways that, certain groups weren't treated well, that everybody was going to hell if they hadn't, like actually taken the name of Jesus in the way they prescribed that you take the name of Jesus. And it just, I started to look at this, the world population with this ever decreasing sliver of people who are going to actually make it into heaven. And I thought, this doesn't feel right. And so eventually I left, and I really gave up. Like I went back to sort of my default place, which was, churches are nice, things to do on Sundays or whatever, but not really that much energy there, not for me. And then that's when I ran into the temple of the universe, right? And I wasn't looking for religion. I wasn't looking for spirituality. But this is where it gets kind of weird because like I go in there and like the way Michael Singer was talking about spirituality really resonated with something deep inside that I had no idea, was even in me. And, you know, it brought up a lot of the concepts that I had developed as I was weighing out whether the Maranatha church was right for me or not. A lot of concepts about who gets to do what, and this is a sin, a thing that you'll get thrown into, like the lasting hellfires for the rest of eternity. That seemed harsh and just didn't seem like really what, like, talk about Jesus being a loving being, and like that's what he does if you fuck up. He's going to throw you into hell. And so as I learned about different versions of spirituality at the Temple of the Universe, I was really happy to see that there was a sense of real deep love and a desire to improve, and that there could be even a sense of innocence about how you face life, that you didn't have to approach it with so much fear of judgment, fear of how Christ was going to judge you, about how different people were going to hell and now I can't be with them, I can't be around them. That half the world, most of the world, everybody who's Muslim is definitely going straight to hell. This place was different, and there was a sense of evolving and growth, and to always look forward. So that, honestly, that's the first time I really got interested in it. And I'm unusually, I mean, what a miracle. Like that's where I found my first real spiritual, home, right? At the Temple of the Universe in the early days of its growth. So that turned into a passion, a lifetime. So that's how I ended up here. I will say that my Maranatha days were amazing, but I was very ready to leave them when the time came, and that it was a very cloistered world of closing out everybody who didn't agree.
Tim, that
Very,
was, I noticed you said that Maranatha, the speaking in tongues part, it's strange because you still got the rigidity of the Baptist tradition, but for the most part, most Baptist traditions don't have anything to do with the tongues. They
Ah,
actually reject it as, that's not something for today. So you got kind of I'll say the worst of both worlds. You got the wild Pentecostal part, and then you got the rigid
I,
Baptist tradition.
I want to say, Mo, that the gifts or the speaking in tongues or the I really, honestly, that's where that was the best part of it for me, right?
I agree. I think the Baptists tried to paint
Uh,
it as the worst part, but it was not. It was actually a little bit of freedom. You're getting a glimpse.
I had an experience, Tim, and we lived in Alabama for a while, a couple of years, and a local pastor wanted me to come to his church. He knew I was a musician. He needed a keyboard player, and it was a Pentecostal church. So I find this Irish boy now playing in a Pentecostal church, singing in tongues and all of that. It was beautiful. Here's what really struck me, though. I found it beautiful too, Tim. That was the first time in my life where I'm like, I'm in a church and there's energy and it feels vibrant and alive. And
yeah,
I'm like, I love this. And yet the same thing happened once the religiosity and the preaching and the screaming started. I'm like, whoa, this doesn't feel okay. But that was, if I was to look at probably the first genuine spiritual experience, it would have been around that. I'd had one similar earlier in the late 1970s. There was a charismatic revival within the Catholic Church.
Uh-huh.
And that became really big in Ireland, where people were same thing. It was Pentecostal based, hands-on healing, speaking in tongues, all the singing. I remember going to one at the one of the big football stadiums in Dublin, hundreds of priests and nuns dancing on the field and music playing, and I'm like, what? But it was very uplifting and vibrant. It only
Yeah.
lasted a short time because the church authorities pushed. It was gone. It was like almost overnight. That nobody even spoke about it. That never happened. So I could see that the religion doesn't like spirituality much. You know, religion as in dogma and religion, but spirituality is that opening thing. So I never want to put down those moments of time where I felt that beautiful energy. It felt loving and compassionate and open. Um,
Yeah, I spent 10 plus years in that environment, the Pentecostal / charismatic, and there's so much energy, and there is an essence of that that's pure and really just folks desiring to connect with
yeah,
God and with each other. Um, so I recognize that non-duality recognizes duality, but not in reverse. The
right.
duality cannot accommodate, transcend, and include non-duality. It doesn't know what to do with it. Um, and so U2, who's from Ireland, Francis, one of my favorite bands, came from a Pentecostal church. They were part of the Vineyard movement out of Ireland, and they've often talked about their faith journey of having to wrestle with the exclusive nature of the religion they were taught, and then opening up to a broader, more expansive spirituality that overlaid most of their music over the years. They're still making music.
yeah,
Still
So
making music, and Bono
yeah,
from a mixed marriage, as they call it in Ireland, one parent Catholic, one parent Protestant, and
yes.
this whole one of the things too. You guys got a kick out of this in that Pentecostal church in Alabama. He asked me, the pastor, to write some music. So I took an Irish song that was a rebel song, anti-British song, and I turned it into a hymnal. And it's got this great Irish kind of dance rhythm to it. And the people in that church absolutely loved what we were doing. And I was often thinking, oh my God, if they knew the background of what this is actually about.
Did you have them dancing in the aisles,
Oh, we
Francis?
had him dancing in the aisles. We absolutely had him dancing in the aisles. Yeah, seriously, everybody up and dancing. Yep.
that energy that we talked about, the Holy Spirit, and when you're, when there's the altar call and speaking in tongues and all of that, to me, I don't know, that just really felt different. Like I had no sense that any of this was other than artifice until that happened. And that the way the energy felt as it came in and the way it kind of just occupied my body, it was amazing to feel that. I'd never felt that before. And I was really amazed when I left and went to the temple. And now it's called Shakti, not Holy Spirit. And it's called prana. And it
Mm-hmm.
feels exactly the same. It is
Yes,
exactly the same. And
yes.
the emotion and the uplift and the purity of intent that drives that was just the same. completely different building, with a statue of Durga and, Yogananda and Christ, on the
Yes.
altar. That was such a powerful, like, I really feel like that moment shaped my entire belief system. Like, just that moment where, okay, everybody's using different words, different language for the same experience. Everybody's born, everybody's dies, everybody calls it something else, but everybody's born and everybody dies. It's all the
Tim,
same.
I always go back. I still have this memory. June 16th, 1975, I had gone to church for vacation Bible school. I don't know if you both did that, but in the summers they had this week-long camp for all the kids, and they would have stories and playtime and crafts and all that. So, parents get a break for a week in the summer. The church would handle us. At VBS that year, I sat with my pastor and I asked Jesus to come into my heart. That was the line crossing from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light.
Yeah.
And so I crossed that line. I just felt something in my heart said, I want this love that this pastor's talking about. I want that. And so I came home, and I'll never forget, I told my mom, this little tiny Indian lady from a remote village in Kerala, she was in the living room, and I told her, and her eyes got wide, and she danced all over that living room because
Oh,
that was the only thing that she had prayed to God for, is that her kids would cross that line and, you know, enter heaven, enter heaven's gates, assurance of heaven's gates. And so I always called that my first step toward the light.
mm, mm,
I would say the last weekend in January 2006, so a lot of things happened in between there, was when I finally embraced something of that light, the essence of that light, when I understood what to dismiss and what to embrace of that initial essence that mom was dancing over. And so I still just love and honor both my parents for pointing as best as they knew how toward that light. And so, as I talk to folks, such hurt happened in those environments that people just reject all of it outright
mm,
and have no desire to explore any of the essence of it, including Jesus' teachings. And I think that really limits our ability to enter into what Jesus showed us, which is the all-inclusive, relentless, eternal nature of love.
mm,
And it's for everyone. We're all wired to give it and receive it. And so if we can maybe look past some of the boundaries that we've set up because of the meaning we've attached to things that have happened. And Mickey does such a wonderful job of this, opening up to say those things that happened don't define you. In fact,
mm,
they didn't happen to you. They simply happened, and you were the witness of those things that happened. That sounds like gobbledygook when you first hear it, but then you realize the spirit in us is never touched, never affected, but always fully present to what it is that's happening.
mm, mm,
So what a beautiful transition to say, you don't have to dismiss outright any of those things that happened and keep Jesus out and the essence of that teaching. You can open yourself up to it if you see yourself as the spirit or the awareness of all of these things.
mm,
Does that
mm.
does that resonate with your experience?
What's really striking, Mo, on that one, all of the words that had been presented to us, all three of us, through the Bible, the words of Jesus, you see, no, not even, you experience in non-duality in a very different light. There's a beautiful book called A New Pair of Glasses by Chuck Chamberlain. And in it, he was asked, a long-time member of Alcoholics Anonymous, lived a beautiful spiritual life, and a friend of his was a Catholic priest, said to Chuck, "What's the deal, Chuck? What is it with this spirituality that you practice and walk?" And he really did walk the walk. He said, you know what, Father, it's really simple. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses. Everything's the same, but you're not seeing it or experiencing it the same way.
Yeah.
The biggest example of that to me was, I'd heard it thousands and thousands of times. Jesus on the cross. Father, forgive these people. They don't know what they're doing. Now, the reality of that from a non-dual perspective is that is absolutely the truth. Absolutely. Because in the essence of it all, people are caught up in the mind, the thinking, the patterns, the behavior, all the stuff that's not their authentic self. And when I saw that with a new pair of glasses, I'm like, that is so profound. How did I miss that before? I didn't miss it. I didn't experience it in that way that it now presents or feels within me. Very different scenario. And it really helps because it that way of looking at those around me, other people, like even right now, I'm sensing in the United States of America this disturbance that's going on. Deep disturbance, not little. It feels very familiar to me because we had it in Northern Ireland, this division, this serious division. And yet, the moment you look beyond the construct, the mental constructs, the games that have been played, you just start seeing beings. It has a different... Like my wife says to me all the time, keep reminding me about that because I get really pissed off by this stuff. I know.
No doubt, Francis.
Yeah.
I think Tim described the change of glasses when he first walked into the temple.
That's what it felt like.
A perspective change.
You know what was at the core of that, and our conversation was taken. It's what you were talking about, Mo, is the sense that like we're born either built to go to hell because we're flawed, or we're built pure and holy and just untouched, unbesmirched, right? And that we're trying to sort of recover. We're like, in one state, we're fighting from this sort of present of damnation into purity, and the other one, we're born pure, and we just have to do sort of this letting go work to recover that purity, or just to get in touch with that deep elemental connection that we have. And that's really what I felt like. I was just living in this completely set deep state of less than and not enough. Like I just couldn't be enough because I felt like, well, I was, I'm born with sin, so that's all I know.
You know, Tim, the energy that you described in those Pentecostal circles, the state in which that energy rested was one that started off as a dirty, worthless, rotten sinner. So the state couldn't accommodate for that energy. And so when the state is able to accommodate the energy, then something beautiful happens. I was at an infant dedication. I think I've shared this story before. My brother's son was being dedicated in a church, and the pastor called his creative arts director to the front and said, we've got onesies that we're designing for these infants, and on the front of the onesie are printed dirty, worthless, rotten sinner, and on the back, preach me the gospel. And everyone cheered, got to their feet and applauded. Yes, preach me the gospel. And so one of the things religion does is it sets in place as absolute truth. Your starting point is worthless, sinner, dirty, and when that is your starting point, no matter what you put on top of it, that core remains. So no matter the excitement that you can sometimes feel and the peace that maybe comes in once in a while when you're in a service, at the core, it never is able to accommodate what is happening. Mickey and others are very clear in emphasizing the starting point is pure, it's whole, it is innocent, it is immersed in love. And now from that place, you can accommodate those things that come in, both good and bad.
Yeah.
They don't change that core. They're not covering it anymore. You are free to be authentically yourself.
Mm.
And so that, what you described, Tim, is the difference between religion, which starts off a certain way, and spirituality, which calls out what you were all along. What a difference.
Yeah. Gosh, that is different. That sense of resonance that you feel. Gosh, I just deal with so many people who feel like they're not enough and they're not good enough. And I can remember in my own life just feeling like I'm just inherently always screwing up. And it was hardly even worth, like, every bit of work I did to advance was based on ego,
Yes.
right? As opposed to
The,
letting
the
go.
spiritual ego is the hardest to recognize because
Yeah.
it's covered in a very pretty veneer. Underneath it, it's your ego hard at work. Tim, you and I have a long ways to catch up to the goodness of Francis O'Connor, but we're working our way there, slowly but surely.
I'll take you guys by the hand. I will.
Appreciate that.
What's
Appreciate
really
your
intriguing,
mentorship.
what you guys are talking about, is that truthfully, nobody's left behind. Nobody's left behind. I get the honor and privilege of working a lot with addiction, a lot. And it never, let me give you one example. As a young man, we've been working together for over 5 years. He's not making it. He's just not. He continually ends up going back out and causing intense pain to himself and everybody around him, and has come close to death on more occasions than is anywhere reasonable at all. And it happened again just a couple of weeks ago.
Mm.
And the last thing I said to him, and this is so important because it's how I was treated as well. My door is always open. My phone is always available. I don't care how many times this happens. You are not condemned and never will be. Yeah. And where that came from, guys, was the beautiful 12-step programs that I talk about a lot because they had such a massive impact. I went to a first meeting at age 17, 18, Alateen, then Al-Anon, AA, ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. My dad was in recovery as well. Every time I come back, and I kept rejecting, I don't want anything to do with this anymore. And I'm talking over a period of 30 to 40 years, a long time. Every time I come back in, somebody came up and said, "It is so good to see you. Let's sit down and talk and let me get you a cup of coffee." That's the Jesus that I know now. That's the spirituality that I know now. No man left behind. No woman left behind. Nobody left behind. No condemnation. Because all I got to do is look at my own life. I had an experience in a meditation of seeing myself as a 27-year-old. Things were very bad. I had been hospitalized 4 or 5 times at that point in psychiatric units, 2 of them for attempting to take my own life. I was a complete mess. I saw that young man, myself, and I put my arms around him for the first time that I can ever remember, accepting myself and saying to him, "It's okay. It's okay. I know where you came from. It could not have been any different from other than exactly the way that it was." And it was that deep, profound knowledge that if you're coming from a construct that's really messed up, you're going to do messed up things. And I'm not trying to say nobody has accountability. This planet will hold you accountable. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way out of that. But for us as spiritual beings, it's not necessary to condemn anybody. And Jesus was very specific about that. "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Let him without sin cast the first stone." It was there all along, but I didn't see it until I put on the new pair of glasses. Yeah.
It strikes me, Francis, you're describing coping mechanisms, and we all have them. If we think we don't, we just have a massive blind spot. We all have them, and mine were performance and religion. And those things are a deadly mix. It's a deadly cocktail to try to cover up your shame and insecurity of never thinking that you're going to be good enough for God, trying to cover that up by performance and doing all the religious things so that you feel a certain way. But underneath it, it was always there. So maybe there's more grace for those who have different coping mechanisms than I do when we see them struggling with. Maybe it's more obvious to the world that their coping mechanism is visible, it's public. Well, mine was more private, but it was just as deadly, just as harmful. I was hiding the same shame and insecurity that person is. So when we see others in ourselves and ourselves in others, grace just flows more naturally. And the love of Christ that said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That doesn't just become an inspirational bumper sticker. That's how I was seen. He was looking at me saying that, not those people over there, those sinners or those religious folks, me. So I think, Francis, you're describing that there's something organic and impossible to stop that flows from us when we're able to see from that perspective and with that heart of love that overflows. It doesn't become a duty. You're telling him my phone's always available. My door's always open. That didn't feel like a duty to you because you saw something.
Yeah, my own experience. Exactly that, Mo. Exactly that. I'll tell you a funny story about religion. I'm going to Ireland in a couple of weeks for a Roman Catholic confirmation. Two of my granddaughters, they're twins, aged 11, are getting confirmed in the Catholic Church. That's a big deal. It's a big party, and relatives and friends come around, and people give the kids money, and it's a big deal. One of the girls came to her mom and her grandmother and said, I have to tell you something. I am an atheist. She's 11. And I want you to know, I am an atheist. Grandma was not happy. That's for sure. Mom, who beautiful daughter of mine, who's very compassionate and kind, said to Amy, what's the deal? If you don't believe, why are you getting confirmed? And Amy looked at her mom and she said, Mom, seriously, it's about the money. It's about the money. Out of the mouth of children.
Show me the money.
Show me the money.
Wow.
But
Classic.
I love the truth and the innocence of that. It's just like that's what's going on for her at that moment in time.
Yeah.
I respect that because I know that background that she's coming from, and she'll be fine. She'll find her own belief in a power that makes sense to her and an energy that's compassionate and kind. And I know she has it in her home because her mom and dad are very loving people, very loving people. Yeah.
Tim, what would you say about this comment? There is something about us that's truer than our beliefs. That's more stable, that's more unchanging, uncreated, permanent than our beliefs, which come and go, just like our thoughts and emotions. Well, how would you?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Tim. I have a thought on that, but please go ahead, Tim.
What you just described is man's eternal quest, as Yogananda would put it, because we have so much conditioning, of things that you believe, things that we believe, not things we know, but things we are taught to believe and to say that we know. We know it's true. Why do we know it's true? Because we read it in the Bible. So, as we go through life, if it's not presented in truth, if it's not existing as truth, it will be revealed. And so our walk is just to align that discrepancy between what we're taught as truth and what we're experiencing as truth. And that's how we move from religion to spirituality as we evolve. That's how I see it.
And I guess, we're all coming from our own experiences here, of course. We talk a lot, all of us are involved in teaching meditation, coaching meditation, teaching classes, all three of us. And we talk a lot about meditation. In relation to what you just said, Mo, I call it the quiet place. When I go to, and I don't even try to do too many techniques around this. I just simply make a decision that for the next, sometimes just as 60 seconds, I'm just always going to be quiet. No past, no future. I'm just going to be present. And the experience, and it's not a thinking thing, it's an actual experience of quiet stillness where no thing is happening. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to say anything. I don't need to be anywhere. The reality of the present moment and the experience of that stillness, and then the recognition that no matter what's happening, that's there, always. Nothing to do with belief systems, countries of origin, family of origin, nothing to do with any of that. And having experienced that, if somebody said to me today, drop all the books, all the courses, everything that you've ever done, you have one simple thing you can do for the rest of your life. It would be to return over and over to what I call the quiet place, because it's quiet, it's peaceful, it's calm, and it's eternal. And you know it's eternal when you're in them, when you're in that, in your awareness. You become what you read about, what I read about all that time. So I love that question, because it's a biggie. Yeah. Even though it's a very simple answer, it just took me 60-something years to, kind of experience it. Yeah.
This is a tricky one for me, coming from an engineering background. For 30 years, I worked in the crash safety business for Ford and GM, and we're just trained to solve problems. And where do you solve most of your problems? Your thoughts, your thinking. So you are exercising your brain to take a bunch of inputs, 50, 100 inputs, and optimize and figure out and analyze. So the idea that you can answer that question, who are you, without thinking, without a thought in response to that, was mind-blowing. Literally mind-blowing. You can set aside the thinking mind and answer from a place of knowing, from a place of awareness. And in order to do that, my barrier from religion is this distance between me and God didn't allow me to think outside of the box of being dirty, worthless. Your thoughts and your actions are filthy like dirty rags. Your righteousness is as filthy rags. Those verses would be drilled over and over. So that the starting place being just so horrific, it was impossible to get to that place of being able to answer apart from thought. And I remember reading Meister Eckhart. He was a German mystic from the 13th century. He said something like, I pray God to rid me of God. I said, holy manatrans, what is he talking about? He's just sentenced himself to hell. But as I stayed with it, I realized what he's saying is all of our concepts of God, Tim, what you were saying, those beliefs were what we were taught. And those beliefs became our foundation, and it became the way that we saw the world, saw God, and saw ourselves. So I had to demolish my portraits on the walls of my mind and my heart about what God was like, and just demolish them and start from scratch. This was in my 40s. I asked God to teach me as if I was a toddler. That, geez, I'm ditching that whole system. Can you teach me as if I was a child? I promise, no resistance. Just show me what you're like. And as I embraced that openness, I started to get the reframe. It took a while. I still had a lot of residue. But man, that portrait just changed so drastically from what I grew up with, uh, and, and reframed and became a mirror. When your portrait of God changes, now all of a sudden you can see yourself so much differently. Uh, Not horrible, rotten, worthless sinner,
Yeah.
but beloved, adored,
Yeah.
cherished one of God, meant for a purpose, born for a reason, to be present to those in your spheres. So I just think portraits of God are so important in our deconstruction to think about. We should never be beyond questioning the portraits that we have of God and by correlation of ourselves.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think you really just summed up the purpose of this podcast, which is that we always question. Are we always doing the right thing? Are we always in the right place? Can we go deeper? That silent place, really, that's the place I trust. But there's a lot of noise between, that
There's a
point of
lot of
silence
noise, a lot
and
of
what we're going
noise
through here on planet Earth.
out
That's
there
the place
and
I
in here,
trust.
right?
Yeah.
Out there and in here, that noise.
Yeah.
You said it beautiful. I mean, that's it, Tim. That's the place I trust.
Yeah.
That's the place I trust.
Beautiful. Well, I think we have a beautiful first edition. I think we've got something that we can build on here. I think we've got something that we can maybe put in front of some of the folks in our group and see how they like it,
Yeah.
and maybe even have another turn this into something we can use as sort of our identification of who we are. So I'm gonna say thanks, fellas, and I'm gonna hit the record button, and then we can have a
I
chat.
appreciate you pulling this together for us, Tim. Much appreciated. Thank you.
An idea that Francis and I had talked about a long time ago. I really think the origination rests with Francis, but you've completed the triangle here. So
Well,
now
thank you, Francis.
It's the difference between 2 wise men and 3 wise men.
Oh my goodness.
Big difference. Yes.
Frankincense.
Can you guys be the wise men, and I can be the 2.5 wise men, and I'll be the half? I need a little room. That's a lot of pressure, dude.
You need frankincense and myrrh.
You can bring the drums and be that little drummer boy.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah, I need some music.
All right. Thank you, fellas.